Who is the primary victim of war, men or women, starting with you?
Oh my God. I'm going to need a minute to think about that. Let's not start with me. Plead the fifth.
How about,
right now.
I'll count to 10.
No. You're going to have to start with somebody else.
Okay. Start with you. Go ahead.
I'm gonna go men on that one.
I'll say men.
Men.
I think both, but
Both?
Yeah, I think both.
Both?
both
Okay.
for sure.
Both.
Yeah, Loki.
Men.
Probably men.
Okay. Now, for those of you who said both, assuming you had to pick one or the other, which do you pick? So
Men.
I mean, I can't really pick because I feel like, I don't want to know if y'all want me to elaborate, but
Sure, you can
I
elaborate.
feel like the women are suffering just as much. If the men are at war and they're dying and the women got to pick up the pieces of all that, and then raise children by themselves and all that, then, they're both really victims.
I would say
if you
both
ask
are
me.
victims, but he asked who's the primary victim.
Primary, I think both.
Who would you rather be in this
just because you're
situation?
dead, there's children now growing up with fathers and all that.
Wait.
And
But you get to
so-
watch them grow up.
Okay, let me get your answer.
So, and then we're talking about like literal war, right? Not some like metaphorical.
Yeah, so you said both. If you had to pick, which?
Statistically, I don't know. I don't know. If you look it up, it'd probably be men.
Okay, so going back to your
Statistic?
point, you're saying, well, it's both because, well, the men are dead, but the women, it's tragic. They've lost their husband, their father.
Yeah, you don't know what
son,
they have to do
whatever it
to
is.
keep it going.
But
keep
wouldn't
it
you
pushing.
agree that when it comes to being a victim of something, being really, really sad isn't as bad as being dead?
What's the emotional trauma being passed down now onto these generations through these men being dead? Sure, they're the primary victims. Are they the primary victims? I don't know. Because now you go to war. Now, let's say your grandpa goes to war, your dad goes to war, your uncles go to war. Now, your grandma and your mom is raising, let's say, 5, 6, 7 children, and you can't even raise these kids. I don't know. And these kids don't have any fathers in their life. So, are they really the men? Sure, they died. They went to war and fought and died, but they're still a victim.
Or then you have
so
the
Let me ask you a different
I don't
question.
know.
If somebody has cancer and then they die of cancer, are they the primary victim?
Well, of course.
Or
But that's
is
cancer.
their
That's a
family-
disease. I think it's different.
Yeah,
than war.
but you still have to pick up the pieces, and you have emotional trauma.
That's true.
And
That is
all
very
the same,
true.
all the same side effects, right?
Well, when you say primary victim, are you talking about physically? Okay, obviously the men who go to war.
In totality. I'm not making any differentiation between.
I feel like you kinda
mentally,
have to, though, in this
physically. No, not
situation.
really.
Why not
Well, the
really?
question is in totality.
I feel like it
So,
goes both ways.
I would say-
I think he made a good point with the cancer thing. I do think he did make a good point with that.
Speaking of which, we
But
didn't get
yes.
your answer to the question.
Both.
Both. Okay.
I would ask, who would you rather be, a man in war or a woman at home stuck with, picking up the pieces?
You're asking a woman from her point of view what I would rather be. I don't know. That's a fair
Just
question.
what situation would you rather find yourself in?
I wouldn't even want to be a man, so.
Men in that
I don't know,
situation
Okay,
does it mean
then we'll just ask it this way: would you rather go fight the wars while the men stayed at home?
If I was physically more.
No, just as you are
adapted,
right
sure. Huh?
As you are right now.
As I am right now. But I want to fight a war. Definitely not.
Yeah, definitely not.
I don't think anybody wants
do
to
you
fight
think-
war,
Do you think? So
including
let's
men.
assume for a second that you're happily married, okay, and your husband has a busted leg, okay, and you get drafted and you get sent off to war, and he stays home, and while you're in the war and there's blood and guts everywhere, and you're watching your friends get, sniped and
It's the
all this
righteous
other
thing to
stuff,
do for
and you
America.
hang on, and you die. Is your husband as much of a victim as you?
If
I'll tell you in a second.
wait. I'm sorry. So if my husband's a stay-at-home,
Yeah.
because I don't know what happened. I got drafted. Okay.
Yeah.
Is he much of a victim? Yeah, I think so. I think
You
now
think
he's
he's
got to
as
pick
much
up
of
the
a victim
pieces
as you are?
of. Yeah, he's just as much of a victim of war as I am. I think.
That's great.
You know,
So
just,
in his
you know,
next marriage, he can sit down and be like, oh man, I've had it rough. My wife died in a war, and I'm as much of a victim as she is.
Yeah,
And,
poor him, man.
And so, you know,
don't know what that did to him.
Really? That's what you think? That's the point of view?
Yeah, well, think about a woman. I mean, if a woman has sit there and her man died, and now she's got to go on with that. I mean, who is to even say like she goes and remarries? But let's say she does. I mean,
I'm
like
not
you can't.
saying she's not going to have like emotional trauma from it. I'm just
Yeah,
asking, do you really think that she's the primary victim here?
I think she's most. I mean, a primary victim. Yeah, I think so. I mean, but that's just my opinion.
Well, then how come your husband wouldn't be the primary victim
I
if you
just said
went
he
off to war?
was. I just said he would have been. I mean,
Oh, he
just
would be.
damn-
So your
I mean,
husband
I
would-
said
okay.
both. Like my answer to the question wasn't man or woman. It was I feel like both are. So that's my answer. It's not.
I don't think
that
you can choose a primary. Is what she's
yeah,
saying.
exactly. I don't think like that. I think they're very much equally primary victims of war. That's what I think.
They're equally
Well-
primary victims.
Yes,
I
if
can-
there's a war going on, just like cancer. If my husband dies of cancer, I feel like I'm primarily a victim of cancer. It took my husband. Now I have to sit here and pick up the pieces of that. So now that makes me somewhat a victim as well. Like I had to deal with that.
So
Maybe
if
just
you-
because I don't have
if you could
cancer doesn't
choo-
mean I'm
so,
not a
so if
victim
you
of
could
it.
choose, if your husband had cancer or you had cancer, and you could choose, which one would you choose?
What if we had to choose which one had to have cancer?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think being a righteous person, you'd always choose yourself. So I guess I would choose myself. I wouldn't want.
you would choose yourself.
I wouldn't
and
want.
then- but you-
Yeah. I mean.
But wouldn't you be victimizing him a bit?
I mean, yeah, but he would be a victim if he chose. It'd be the same way, vice versa. If I wanted
Got
to do
it.
it, and he wanted, you know, so
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I have a couple clarifying questions on this one. So when it comes to, some of you said both, does anybody here think it's women or is it both?
I think it's
Say more.
Okay, so I'd like to perhaps break this down into a couple different conflicts. So, and I want to break it down geographically. So, the United States, for World War I, who's the primary victim of war of the U.S. population during World War I, men or women, or is it both?
Wait a second.
Okay,
Well, you're
Wor-
saying the primary victim of war.
In World War
during World War I.
Yeah.
Does that change your answer at all? For those of you who said both.
Well, I mean, who was the primary victim? Who had the most casualties was obviously men, and probably young men at that. But you know, does that mean the women weren't victims in World War I? Yes, they definitely were. They had to
Okay,
pick
here.
up the pieces.
The women had to pick up. Okay, your answer.
Yeah.
You said both, right? Okay, for World War I, what's your answer for U.S. men?
For U.S. men, I think, well, since I said both, I feel like men, it's more physical, like physical trauma, and for the women, it would be more mental. And I'm not saying that war doesn't have.
For the women, yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's just because, like, say your like husband died, and that's like the love of your life, and like you love that man, and he dies, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, like that's. It's
Okay.
like
And I believe
emotional
too, then
versus
in World
physical.
War I, or no, I guess it was probably more like World War II, where it was like the economy went really bad, and women were the ones who had to carry the economy while men were at war. You know.
So just to be clear on the World War II note that you just brought up, the
I know they had to get up and like go work.
Yeah, but it's
It's
not
just
because women didn't have rights
fucking
before
crazy.
that.
Those
so
victims.
that's why they gave
had
us
to get up and
rights
go
because
work.
they couldn't
Weren't
work.
they like
Wait,
woman?
well, just to be clear, you said women didn't. There's a lot.
I mean,
there's-
they did have some rights, but they didn't have the right to vote. And so
Wait,
what
just to
was
be
it?
clear, women. You're saying your argument is women didn't have the right to vote during World War II.
I mean, I can't remember the year, but if it was the 30s, 40s, or 50s that women were able to vote.
What year did women get the right to vote?
I don't know. Was it the 50s or was it the 30s?
Well, here, let me ask you a different question.
I'm not
What
sure.
year? What decade was World War I?
It was in the 1910s, right?
Well done.
Yeah.
What years were World War II?
It was the late 1920s, 1930s, I believe, wasn't it? Or didn't it start? It all started like Nazi Germany. All that started around like the 20s, the early 20s. So I can't give you exact dates.
You're
'cause
not-
I can't remember.
I mean, you said late 30s, so you're
No,
not
I said
totally
late
far
20s,
off,
early
but-
30s, right? Wasn't
Well,
it?
not late 30s is correct. Late 20s for World War II, not so
Oh,
much.
okay.
Okay, women got the right. Okay, World War I, 1914 to 1918.
Mm-hmm.
Women got the right to vote 1920. World War II, 1939,
Mm.
1945.
Right. Okay. So there you go. You know more
but
than me.
you said that the
well,
women.
I know women weren't really working during World War II up until that time. So I know that that's when women became in the workforce more.
And
Was
you
during
think
World War II.
women having to be involved in the war effort during World War II is a bigger
No,
level
but
of
it-
suffering and victimization than the men who had to go?
I mean, what are the women having
war?
to deal with? Like they
Well,
have
I'll
to
tell-
raise.
I'll give
Listen,
you-
listen.
hang on,
They
I'm
have to
gonna- I'll
raise
tell you- I'll
families.
tell you
They
some of
have
the
to
extreme
work.
conditions.
They have no
These-
help. That's
Yeah.
the
These
economy
are-
is super poor. So
Yeah,
these
yeah,
women
these
are
extreme
victims.
conditions. I'll explain the conditions to you, to women.
Mm.
They had to go into factories, sometimes for up to 8 hours a day,
Oh man.
and work.
Listen, no. And their husbands are their husbands are at war.
Mm-hmm.
They're at home taking care of all the children, all the bills. The economy
lot
is
of them didn't even
super
have
poor. The
children.
economy is super horrible. We're in the Great Depression, right? The Great
Wait,
Depression's
hold
in the
on.
30s. So
The Great
wasn't it
World
in the
War
30s,
II,
early
Great
30s?
Depression.
Yeah. Well,
Okay,
maybe that was
okay,
after.
So,
Back to
so
history
hang on,
class.
hang on.
Man, I know
Okay,
some history,
what would be
but
the
I can't
distinction
remember
now?
exact years.
Wait, what would be the distinction now between a single mom getting up and going to work? It's just like I don't get it. If the victim, they're victims because they had to look after their own children, which they would have to do
No,
anyway,
because
and they
they-
had to work.
No, they're victims of war.
And guess what? Nobody
because of
forced
the
them to work.
economy. Because their men are not there. They're at war. Their husbands
Mm-hmm.
are dying. Their fathers are dying. Their uncles, brothers, sons are dying.
Mm-hmm.
That's emotionally traumatizing. I know during the World War II economy was not that great. I believe. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the economy was great, but I thought it wasn't from what I thought. But
I've got a couple questions here. So,
I mean, those poor women, they had to go work.
it's not about working.
Okay, I'm
There's an
gonna-
emotional trauma, and women are way
I know
more
it's way more
than men.
emotionally traumatizing to deal with the death rather than getting blown up yourself.
I'm not saying like the
Hold
men
on.
aren't victims.
So let me
Like I said, both are.
just throw out a couple statistics here. So 16 million Americans served in the United States Armed Forces during World War II. There were almost 300,000 were killed, 670,000 were wounded, almost exclusively men.
Yeah.
There were also 130,000 American prisoners of war, of whom 116,000 returned home after the war. Now, let's also make an assumption here, and maybe, Andrew, I don't know if you can help me search this. What percentage of the serving military men were married? Because typically they're drafting 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. I know people got married much younger then. I don't know if they have statistics on
Again,
that.
uncles,
but
fathers, brothers,
let's just for the
not
sake
just
of
husbands.
let's just for the sake of argument say that a majority of the men were not married, didn't have children, didn't have a significant other, didn't have a girlfriend. So the sort of in my view, the secondary victims would be who? The family?
It's estimated.
So like I said,
Wait,
sure,
hold
you
on.
wanna be right.
About 46% were married.
46%. Okay, so a minority, but still a lot, right?
Still a lot.
Okay. But let's talk about then that majority of men who were single, who were not married. If we talk about them, we look at them, I assume they only had a mother and a father. If they're the ones that go and die, and they don't have a significant other to mourn for them, wouldn't
I mean, you don't
hold
think
on,
your
let me finish
mom-
my point.
Grandma.
Let me finish my
sister.
point. Wouldn't you said mom, grandma, sister,
Younger children
brother,
you might have, even though
father,
they're single.
uncle. You do realize that the suffering, the secondary suffering that you're alluding to, that is experienced by family members, is equally shared by the genders. The mother loses a son, the father loses a son.
Mm-hmm.
So assuming these majority of men,
I think it's wrong to like think that women aren't just as much as victims, but okay.
Hold
Like,
on.
Men are more victims.
but hold
sure.
on. So
Just because they had to
but
fight.
actually engage with the scenario I'm giving you here. Of the single men
Mm-hmm.
who had, let's assume they had a mom and a father who were living, and let's say they had no siblings, and it was just the mom and the father, and then that boy, man, whatever, went to war and he died. His mom is going to grieve. His father's going to grieve and mourn. in that scenario, who's the primary victim of war?
I mean, definitely the guy, I guess. But I mean, who's to say that the emotional impact and physical and financial impact doesn't reflect just as much in the family?
Right, but okay, so hold on. I'm trying to look at this from a math perspective here.
I just got to
I think
ask
you're
this
just trying to prove
real
your
fast.
point, and
Who's the
I'm-
primary
you know?
victim in an abortion, the mother or the fetus?
Oh man,
Fetus.
I'm not gonna speak on this one. This is
Yeah,
political.
I'm just asking you. Who's the primary victim, the mother or the fetus?
I don't know. An abortion?
Yeah.
Probably the baby. I mean, I don't know.
Depends. I feel like.
I feel like I'm definitely pro women's choice, so I'm not gonna sit here.
All right,
and,
we
you
can come
know.
to that later. We can come to that later. So, okay. If there's one mother, if there's one father, and there's one male who dies,
Mm-hmm.
and if this is the majority of the men that were involved in World War II that lived in the United States,
But okay, but it just because they were single doesn't mean that they didn't have children or anything. Just, that you don't.
they
have,
probably,
you know what I'm
if
saying?
they weren't married, they probably didn't have children in this time period.
I would say yes and no. You know, I
Okay,
agree with you.
let's-
No, I agree with you because during that time,
Okay, let's
obviously,
assume- let's
yes. But does that mean they didn't have children?
Wait, hold
No.
on. But the
So
children,
out of
let's
the
assume the
40%,
gender of the children
46%.
of these men who had children out of wedlock, 50% were boys and 50% were girls.
Okay, what like the children, the babies?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what does that have to do with
You're
who's the
the one
victim? These
you
children are
brought
now
up.
growing up with no father.
I don't even understand
out of
your
wedlock,
argument.
even worse.
I don't even understand your
Yeah.
argument here because the child could be a boy or a girl. The framework of the question is who's the primary victim of war, men or women?
And
so
I
if it's
said
a
both.
boy child and if it's a female child and this is equally distributed, then
How is
this
it
doesn't
not?
help your argument that it's both.
It does.
No, because
It
okay,
does,
if you-
actually.
fine, I'll grant you. Let's say he had 2 children out of wedlock. He has one father, one mother, one boy, and one girl. That's still an extra man who's dead. Who is the primary victim of war?
Everybody involved.
It's amazing. I have to. So I don't even know how to actually argue this. I'm just going to,
Exactly.
if Andrew, I'm going to defer to you because I can't even.
I was just going to say, if the baby is the primary victim in an abortion, what is the deciding factor that makes the baby the primary victim and not the mother?
Mother's health.
How far along the fetus is.
Yeah, no, hang on. I'm asking the gal here. She was the one who gave the answer that she thought that the baby was the primary victim. If that's the case, what is that deciding factor as to why the baby's the victim, the primary victim, and not the mother?
I mean,
What do you think that would
I
be?
feel like I can't really answer this question because it's not really something I want to speak on, for one, and two, I'm pro like people just make their choices. Like I do what I would do personally. I don't put onto what the next person could do. So what I feel like would be wrong, I'm not gonna judge somebody else. So. You know what I'm saying? Like
not
that's not
asking
my
if you get
yeah,
one or
and
not.
so
He's
I'm not
asking-
gonna answer the question for that reason. What I feel like my opinion is on the answer, I don't want to give it because it's a very political question, and I
Okay,
don't
okay,
feel like-
okay. Well, let's try it a
Yeah.
different way. You would agree that aborting at 9 months would be bad, right? You would at least agree that that's true.
I mean, yeah, the baby's full grown, full term.
Yeah.
So,
So if the
sure.
mother had the abortion, then who would be the primary victim?
I mean, why did the mother do it? Like,
'Cause she
why?
didn't want it
She just
anymore.
didn't want it. Okay, then the baby, because now you're
Then
just
the
being
baby.
selfish.
So what would make the baby the primary victim?
I mean, you carried a baby full term to where it
Yeah,
should be.
would it be the
A baby
death
couldn't
part
live
that would
outside
make
the
the
womb at
baby
this
the primary
point, so it
victim?
doesn't even need to be in your, you know. So at that point, if you get an abortion, then sure. But I don't really want to speak on abortion because, yeah, it's not my place. I don't think.
All
I
right.
think-
Well, do you have something quick? 'Cause I'll
Yeah,
move
pretty
things
quick.
on.
I think the point he was trying to get at is the baby's the primary victim because the baby's dying. And so he was going to turn that over to men in war dying and saying that if you use that logic for abortion, it can be applied to this scenario
But it's
where
like
the man would
comparing
be the
apples
bigger
and
victim.
oranges, like war to abortion. Like It's two different things. War is a very
Right,
like
you can compare things that are very different.
Yeah, there's never a comparison which is going to be exact. What we're trying to just do is just test the logic for perceived victimhood.
Right.
So in this case, in war, I think I understand what you're
Save that
saying.
one,
You're
man.
saying that there's a bunch of external factors which could make women also victims in war, which would include things like emotional damage, trauma, psychological intergenerational trauma, which could happen because you lost grandpa when you were a kid, all of these different factors which could possibly go into this. Okay, but if we're looking, even though we have all these correlates for different factors of victimhood, I would still say there's primary correlates. In this case, I would say the primary correlate is death. And so I would ask that even in an abortion, I would assume that this type of trauma and stuff like this at 9 months would also exist for women. So why would the baby be the primary victim? That's the question.
yeah. I don't really want to speak on the abortion. So.
Okay.
She doesn't want
I
to
just don't
engage on
want
that.
to.
That's fine. I will just really quick last thing here. Nick, you know that Ukraine split screen that we have? I'll have you pull that up. Nope, not yet, not yet. Okay, it's okay. I should have been more clear. So, okay. You guys are all familiar with the Ukraine conflict, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, actually, wait. Before I do that, ask her if a woman goes to war, who's the primary victim of war? If we switched it, let's
I already answered this question.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, with you. You said the same thing. You said if your husband got his leg blown off and you had to go and you got whatever the war, and you had to fight, would he be the victim too? I mean, I already stated that I think both are the victims. So,
Okay.
yes.
So there's a very recent conflict, the Ukraine-Russia conflict. So this one's an interesting one because it's much more recent. We're all familiar with it, I'm assuming. So Ukraine is kind of the perfect microcosm of the inconsistency inherent in feminism. Women are the equals of men until the bombs start to drop. Now, I'll ask you once more for everybody who said it's both. In the Ukraine conflict, who's the primary victim of war, men or women, starting with you?
I am not familiar enough on this situation or educated enough on this situation to speak on it. Like, just plain and simple.
Well, but you were able to, for the previous question, you were
I don't
able
know
to say
what's
both.
going. I don't know what's
But
going
you,
on.
well,
I
you are
haven't.
familiar that there is a war in Ukraine, correct?
Okay. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So are you asking
So-
specific to that? Are you asking specific to that war?
Mm-hmm.
I
Or you
don't
just
know
don't
what's
know
going
enough.
on
Okay. What about you?
in that war, if I'm going
You
to be
said
honest.
both. You said both. Does your answer change at all when it comes to Ukraine?
Who's the primary victim at war with the Ukraine?
Of the
Like,
Ukraine war,
I
men
mean,
or women?
aren't women fighting in that war?
There
aren't
are
the
some.
citizens?
There are some women.
I guess whoever the
I
biggest
mean-
Let's assume that 5% of the military is female. Go ahead and answer the
But
question.
aren't the citizens fighting the war as well, not just the
The what?
military? Aren't the citizens of Ukraine fighting the war,
Yeah,
not
if you
just the
adopt
military?
Well,
So then it would be
Let's-
both, because they're both fighting.
somebody.
I mean,
is,
I think both, regardless of if the woman is fighting or not. So
No, civilians aren't really fighting in the war, no. There's some incidences of that, but it's primarily the two military forces, and civilians are doing what they usually do in war and supporting the military operations via support roles.
Then I guess the primary victim would be whoever's the bigger statistic. Which I don't know.
I mean, that's what he was proving. That's what he's trying to make his whole point this whole time.
Oh, I mean, it's overwhelmingly men who are dying in the war, for sure.
Facts.
But that's every war. It's overwhelmingly men who are dying in every war. Doesn't matter if it's that
And who's
conflict
starting all
or a
these
different
wars?
conflict.
Probably men.
Not the men that are fighting in it.
Yeah, definitely not. You know, war is a
Those are the men we're
rich
talking
man's
about.
game.
Well, I mean, war like affects everybody. I mean, it's gonna hurt families. It's gonna hurt children and everyone. So I feel like there's not really, you can't even compare two different types of pain, because if someone's staying at home, they're still gonna be hurt and affected by the people that are fighting in the war. Like if my, say son gets drafted, I'm gonna feel the pain of that just as much as he might be feeling the physical pain. So I feel like again, it's both because you can't really compare physical and mental pain.
But that
You don't
really
know
wasn't the
necessarily.
question.
What's the
The
question?
question was who is the primary?
Primary.
You, like
But
all
we're
this
saying
other
both.
it's like mental
You guys
gymnastics
are not
to come to these
understanding
longer
that.
We're
answers.
saying both.
You
It's
guys
not
just
mental
aren't liking the
gymnastics.
answer.
Exactly.
Well,
You guys are
Exactly.
simply just not liking the
100%.
answer. You guys
no,
want
because
one.
we're
Saying
giving
it's
why
both.
we feel like it's both, and we're saying it's not just a physical aspect; it's also an emotional aspect that, and not just that, but it's a lot of other things that, you know, women have to pick the pieces up on in war, and so that makes them less of a victim because they didn't die in it. Like, I agree with that.
Okay,
That's just that's my opinion.
So I'll just kind of where I'm going here with the
Like, they're
Ukraine
all
conflict. I don't know. Did you weigh in on this? Did you give a
I mean, yeah, I guess both.
still both? Okay.
I'm gonna say both.
So I'll just give you guys an additional information and see if it changes your mind at all. So at the breakout of the war, there was a decree by the Ukrainian government that required all military age men, in fact, even very old men, so all men between the ages of 18, I believe, to either 60 or 65, had to remain in the country. They could not flee, they had to stay, whereas women and children could leave. And in fact, a great many women, millions of women, fled Ukraine. They were not compelled to join the military or anything like that in the same way that men were. Knowing this additional information, this inequality, that the men had to stay, I think if they got caught, they could face punishment, they could go to jail, fines, etc. Knowing just this additional piece of information, does that change your answer at all?
Sure, a little bit.
Into the mic, please.
I said sure a little bit. I think, yeah, I guess like that would make them more of a victim, but that makes them a victim of their own country and, you know, politics and
Well,
physical.
a victim
who
of their
are,
own country, but
yeah,
their
because
country's
your
at
country,
war.
of course, which it's
And if the
good
wartime
to make-
policy, is to allow every single woman in the
but you
country,
can't leave. You're being. I mean, then that's America does it too. So there's a draft, and you have to go if they say you got to go. I mean, that sucks. Like that is
okay,
like that.
does it change your answer at all, knowing this extra piece of information?
I mean, I kind of have the same feeling. Like men are more of the victim of physical pain because, like, even if it's vice versa, like if the men were staying home.
Do you think war is strictly physical injury?
Oh no.
Have you heard about this?
No, it's strain.
Have you heard
It's
about
PTSD.
shell shock?
It's PTSD. I understand
Have you heard
that.
of shell shock?
Yes, I understand that.
Okay. So why do you keep going to this? Well, in the physical realm, men suffer more.
Because if you go onto a war field versus stay at home, like how are you? Like, are you more likely to get like bombed? Yeah. Like physical pain. Like if you walk out into
Okay.
a minefield versus staying at home. Like who's gonna,
I guess where I'm confused here is you're saying, well, men on the physical realm they have it worse, but in the psychological, mental
Oh no, that's
realm-
terrible. No one can like.
But so I don't really understand, because you say both. So if you say both, wouldn't you follow your argument up from, well, men on this hand have it worse, but women on this hand have it worse. But I failed to see on which hand
It's just-
women have it worse
Well,
when it comes to war.
I wouldn't say worse. It's just bad. War is bad. There's no good war. There's
Let
no
me
one
ask you a
in the
question.
right.
If somebody stole $5 from you versus somebody stole your entire life savings, I don't know how much your life, maybe if it's $5, it doesn't matter, but which one would be worse?
Definitely life savings.
Okay. Because of the magnitude in which someone has deprived you of your belongings, in this case, your money.
Yeah. Are you comparing that to the men in war? Is that the statistic?
Well, if a woman trips and falls and get a boo-boo, you know,
Well, I mean, like.
versus a man gets a shell impaled through his body.
Yeah, that blows.
One's
that
worse than
blows.
the other.
But like his kids at home, like it's just as bad. Like his kid. I mean, it's not. No, it's not just as bad. I take it back. But the kids at home are still gonna like feel shit. The mom's gonna feel shit. So
Yes, I don't disagree with
So
you.
I guess
that-
arguably men would have it statistically worse. But okay, now I'm gonna change my answer because men statistically would have it worse. But
Okay.
I guess my point is that the people at home are still gonna feel that too.
And then what about you?
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, it sounds like you're coming from a physical standpoint, so physically.
No, I'm speaking in totality.
Okay, yeah. I mean, arguably because they experience both mental pain and physical pain, I would say statistically, yeah, but I'm not taking away from those who are suffering back at home as well.
Yeah,
No,
just
everyone's a
neither am
victim
I.
of
Sucks
war.
for everyone.
Yeah.
Nobody
But
ever
that's
denied
not the
that
argument.
that the women aren't victims of war.
Women
of course they
absolutely
are.
suffer.
Primary
But I
victim.
think
Women
it's both.
absolutely suffer, but thank you, Abigail. The original question was, who is the primary?
I still
That means there
think-
can be a secondary.
I still think it's situational.
I think it could be situational
What do you
if
mean?
like if the man got killed and then the son, like let's say
Yeah.
a woman had a son and then he like went in a spiral and died too. I think that the mother
So
would be the
wouldn't
primary.
men still, if she has a son, wouldn't men still be the primary victim? Because that's a male.
What
That's
if
a
it's
double,
daughter, though?
yeah.
What if she?
What
What
if
if
she-
it's a daughter?
yeah,
what if
What
it's
I mean, she does
oh.
the same thing. She spirals out. My dad died in war. I hate life now.
Yeah. That's
my,
tough
that's
one.
my dad. I love my dad.
But wouldn't she then be
But
a
you just don't feel as
secondary?
sympathetic
Wouldn't she be a
the woman.
secondary victim?
Secondary.
Because her father was the
Primary victim, yeah.
Also, I would like to say, so yes, you have a whole family that's losing their father as he goes off to war, but you have the father that's losing his whole family as he goes off to war.
Yeah.
They're at home. He's at war. They have each other.
Yeah.
He has himself.
That's exactly why we're saying both.
Anyways,
No.
there's
Yeah.
one